always tease that he's real close and stuff like that. So
Are you saying this head's too big for his body, or
he's just got a big head. He's got a large noggin, and I've got a big nose. I always joke about that. So my nose is always in other people's business.
Do you remember the movie Michael Myers, So I Married an Axe Murderer? And he does his character's eye, his Scottish character, and he's talking about the size of the noggin on the guy.
No, I haven't seen that.
It's like a 25-year-old movie. It's called So I Married an Axe Murderer. It's a comedy with Michael Myers, and it's hilarious. The way he goes off on this kid about the size of his head. Look at the size of the noggin on that boy. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, my oldest son, John, your assistant, had hydrocephalus when he was young and had brain surgery. And so I said to the neurosurgeon early on, I said, I've always had a large head. My mother had kind of a large head. So we just figured it was running in the family. And he said, well, you might have had hydrocephalus. Your body just adjusted eventually, but Jonathan's didn't. He had to have surgery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he had surgery, 18 months. And then again, when he was 17 years old. So.
Oh, no kidding. So the waited that long, and I'm sure because the progress and the body kind of matures and grows at a certain rate at different times.
Well, he had a shunt put in to relieve the fluid, and then they had what's called a third ventriculostomy, which is a cutting of a small thing in your brain that allows the ventricles. You have 4 ventricles in your brain, and that allows those to communicate with one another. And then the fluid doesn't collect and it goes down your spinal cord. So he had that when he was 17. He was a candidate for that, and it worked. So we're very grateful.
Oh, well, thank goodness for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have, hopefully we don't have to take 40 minutes, but we've got a captive audience. So we're going to steal as much time as we can from you and try not to.
Well, if after 5 minutes you think, oh, this guy's boring. He really has not lived a life. Feel free. You won't hurt my feelings at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think what we're going to do, we'll get into this quickly because, well, I won't say, we've talked about some of the things we're going to talk about, but we want to save as much time as possible. And we're going to, when we get into our studio to do our podcast, we're going to kind of introduce things whatever way we need to do that. So we don't have to feel like we've got to kind of do a great introduction here. We'll get to all of the stuff that we want to talk about. So you good with that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll just follow your lead.
Okay, and I think I'm recording. I sure hope.
Yeah, it said recording is in process, so we should be good.
Okay. So, I guess I wanted to start out just a little bit talking about the fact that, and we won't go over this a whole lot, Bill, because in all of the interviews that we've done, I've talked about this. So just a brief reminder for people. I've known you for over 11 years now, and I stumbled onto your YouTube channel very early on in my voiceover career. And
we were both just kids, as I recall.
Yeah, exactly. And you were, I think, fairly early in your YouTube. You had been doing voiceover for a few years, but you were starting that. And I'm not patronizing you. We talk about this all the time. I'm so thankful that I found you, because like I've said, out of all the voices out there, you made the most sense to me. And so I gobbled that YouTube stuff up because I didn't know what else to do. You know, I'd been in radio for 30 years. The people were brought to you, to the station, the audience. And then all of a sudden I'm doing voiceover and I don't know who am I supposed to sell myself to? Yeah. And so I applied that and worked it, the principles that you had. And it took me about 5 years to really lay some things down and get the ball going. But after 5 years, I made over $100,000. And then the next year, and for the next 3 years, it was over 200,000. And the last 2 years, it's been over $300,000. And that's in great part to your mentorship. And I can't say thank you enough. So I really appreciate that. I really do.
It means a lot coming from you, Todd. Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, money isn't the most important thing. We know that that's not the most important thing, but what it has allowed, this greater income, far, far greater than I could have ever imagined working in, Christian radio for all those years, was that it's allowed myself and our family to be more generous to people. We've been able to hire people who maybe were having a little tough luck at that point. And so that was wonderful. We've been able to save more money. And with my 6 boys, Becky and I, we have 6 adult sons, and we've been able to start VO Marketing Pro. We've been able to help Hudson launch his voiceover career. And now we're able to do this original father-son podcast, which you're a part of. So again, I know I've had to do work, but again, the principles were very, very important and still are. I still use the same basic principles every single day that I've learned from you.
No, well, and thanks, Todd. And you're one of the very first people who actually sent me, there's a postcard or a letter, but over the years, you've sent me multiple things. I don't remember what the first thing was. It said, hey, I'm using this training and it's actually working. And I kept that and I like put it up in my office because, you know, it's just good to be reminded every now and again. You want to be affirmed that what you're, sorry, my daughter was trying to call me there. I don't know if that came through or not.
It did, but we can cut that out.
Okay, my apologies.
No problem.
Let me tell her I'm on. I should have told her before.
It's all right. That happens.
Yeah, we're not.
I'll just turn that off there. There we go.
I just was going to start dancing to it. Honestly, it was kind of a.
Oh my God. Yeah, I did not let her know what was going on. So yeah, I took that card or letter, whatever it was. I remember putting it up in my office just and as a matter of fact, I did that after I think everything you ever sent me. I would put it up just as a reminder, because it's good to know that sometimes you wonder, is this helping anybody? You know, and I occasionally get the email, you know, and that kind of thing. But when somebody takes the time to actually write a letter, I mean, a handwritten letter or card, that means a lot. So, so thanks. You know, that was an encouragement to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't hard to connect the dots of my success with what I had, you know, the principles that I had learned from you. So that was very heartfelt, and it just made sense. And so I guess, you know, talking about the original father-son voiceover podcast, it just made sense to have you be our first guest. We've asked you to be our podcast voice. And so having you be here the first time, yeah, it's a lot of pressure. Everything is dependent on you, Bill, to make this success.
The inaugural broadcast.
It's exactly. Yeah. No, you're good to go. But let's talk just a couple of minutes. We want to go off the beaten path, because I've watched you in so many interviews, and most of it is, how did you get involved in voiceover? You know, what do you do, this and that? And that's good stuff, but they can find that elsewhere. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about your background, maybe growing up, and then get into a couple of things that maybe we'll have to tiptoe around, or maybe you'll just charge right into it. We'll let you lead in answering the questions.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. And so I guess one of the questions I had for you, just very basic, DeWees, what ethnicity is that?
It apparently is Dutch, which I didn't know until I was like in my 30s, believe it or not. My dad always said he thought we were part German and part French, or I don't even remember what the European combination was. But when I was 31, we moved to the Chicagoland area when I was managing a station. I was on air. I was doing mornings there. And I remember I started getting phone calls from people in the New Holland area. Yeah. And I had no idea. Apparently there's like a secret club among the Dutch, and that if you are Dutch, you are accepted kind of as one of their own. And and I remember one of the first things I was introduced to was the term, you ain't much if you ain't Dutch.
Yep.
I remember somebody telling me that. And these people from New Holland were always calling up, oh, DeWees, it's good to have a DeWees. I had no idea, and I couldn't break their hearts and tell them I didn't realize I was Dutch, but apparently it was a big thing to them. So I just kind of basked in that love for a while. It was nice. So I'm Dutch.
Yeah. And I went to school in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a very Dutch area. At least it used to be.
Yeah.
Huge area. In fact, when we first moved there, most of the stores weren't open on Sunday because it was such a Christian reformed Dutch area. And that was the same thing. If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, they said. But here's something interesting. You said from South Holland, Illinois. That's interesting. I never heard that before, because here's why that's interesting. When I was working at the radio station in Michigan, the World Home Bible League contacted me and asked me to do a voiceover in the mid-'60s. And it was from the World Home Bible League in South Holland, Illinois, which is, I think, what you're referring to, the Dutch
Yes.
enclave there.
Who was the head of that organization? Do you remember?
I don't remember. All I know is I drove across town, came back in 1 hour and made $60. And for a person in the early 80s that
And
was
you were
making
thrilled.
I mean, it was like
Oh, I hear
$350 now, you know, I mean, it was
Yeah,
just like,
oh.
I'll take that. I could do this all the time, but there was no technology. So I
Yeah.
was stuck doing radio, you know, for the next almost
Right.
30 years. So that's interesting. There's a connection there with South Holland, and that's
Yeah.
a Dutch, kind of a Dutch enclave, or at least it used to be.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. As far as I know, but I could not believe the reception I gained. I never had a community embrace me as much as I had New Holland.
That's very interesting, even though you didn't know you were
Who
Dutch.
knew? I didn't even know I was Dutch.
So you grew up in that area, or you grew up, where did you grow up in the
Ohio. I grew up near
Okay.
Columbus, a little
Okay.
town called Lancaster, Ohio.
Okay, in the 60s and 70s. Was that, you know, that was a turbulent time in the United States. I mean, I grew up near Madison, Wisconsin, where I live now, and they had lots
Yeah.
of protests and stuff. And then how far is Kent State, where the students were shot and killed during the
Several
anti-war?
hours from where I lived.
It is. Okay. Did
So,
you,
I mean,
were you
I was
affected?
very aware.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was very aware of it. I was very young. I was born in 59. So, you know, around that time, you know, you get in the late 60s, I'm around 10, 11 years old. So I had a vague awareness of what was going on, but my life was as it is, but I think a lot of kids, just consumed by music, you know, and my friends and sports and the stuff that we were doing, you know, watching Cincinnati Reds play
Mhm,
baseball and listening to, you know, the Beatles and you know, the whatever. There was so many things. We just get together and listen to records and watch baseball. I mean, that was like our biggest. That was it.
Yeah. And that seemed to be like just 30 minutes away from our home. There were people getting their heads smashed in, and they were
Yeah.
bombing things and stuff like that at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And we lived out
Oh,
in the
yeah.
sticks, and there was not a real connection, because I was 9 or 10. I'm about a year younger than you are. But the world was going through, you know, there was the hippie, and we were kind of on the tail end of that
Yeah.
whole movement and things like that. So I didn't know
As
if that
I look back on, you know, as I've looked at history and I'll hear things referenced, sometimes it amazed me to realize I was so far removed that it really didn't have a big impact on my life. Again, a vague awareness, but Lancaster, Ohio is a fairly small town. So we weren't in Columbus. We were kind of our own thing, and it just kind of flew past me without really having much of an impact.
Were you involved in like musicals at school, plays? Did you get into the theater side of things, or you were just into music?
No, not at all, which is interesting because all three of my kids have been, you know, they did theater and music and, you know, excelled in that. I just wanted to be a guitar player. I mean, I just wanted to play rock and roll. That's all. You know, then when I was in 5th grade, I started playing, I picked up the viola, you know, which is a little bit larger than a violin. So from 5th grade through 9th grade, I took lessons and learned, played in the school orchestra and did all of that. But I loved rock and roll. And so finally, a friend of mine, when I was 16 years old, he taught me how to play 3 chords, G, C, and D. And so picked up a guitar, started playing. And when I got to college, it was like surgically attached to my hand. That's all I did is I just played and played, got in a band. And I remember in college, I played with a bunch of guys who they were very good. And it was a Christian university, and it was a Christian music band. And they got signed to a record deal by a label called Brentwood Records in Nashville, which later became Essential Records, Jars of Clay, and a bunch of other groups. I think Third Day. So with that label in time, this was pre that. This was like at the very birth of that label. But I just I wanted to be in radio, so I didn't pursue it. Which is interesting because within a year they had broken up and they did their tour, and I was still playing weekends for like, you know, the next 20 years. So.
That's
It all worked out.
Hudson, any questions that you have? Anything that comes to mind?
No, not really. Just when did you, were you always, decent at singing? Because Dad, you showed me that video or whatever you did about, what was the song called?
It was Daisy Jane, America.
Sister Golden and Daisy Jane. Yeah. For some reason, I only covered America. I don't know why that is. That's the stuff I listen to is, I listen to Foreigner and Styx and more guitar driven bands. But You know, I don't know if that had any awareness of how good or not good I was or wasn't at that point in time. I just knew I liked to do it, you know. And then when I got into college, I got asked to play and sing a lot. So I realized I must be able to do something. Okay. I started doing coffee houses and I started traveling around with groups and so yeah, at that point, you know, it just kind of became a thing. And up until we moved to Illinois, I was out with a group of guys. We were out every weekend, someplace in Ohio or Kentucky or West Virginia or someplace. And then once I moved to Illinois, yeah, I was still involved in my church stuff, but I didn't do any traveling around.
So you did that. So now you don't. So when did you move to Illinois?
We moved to Illinois in 91 and
Okay.
we were there for 30 years. And then a year ago, we moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where my wife grew up. And so we've been here for a year, but I've reconnected with the band, my friends from Columbus. And we're actually getting back together.
The band is getting back together.
Yeah.
Yeah, the band, it's like a bunch of old guys trying to relive their glory days, I guess. I don't know but we just decided, because we were just like really close, just good friends. And they're such, you know, they're accomplished musicians, and they're so good, and it's so much fun to play with them. And so, yeah, we're trying to get a set list together now. So we'll see if anybody actually wants to hear us or not.
Yeah, that was
Oh
going to be
gosh,
my
that's
next
funny.
question.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question, is if you were going to be doing that again, or if you had done it ever since then, or maybe you had taken a 30-year,
Yeah,
hiatus.
I hadn't picked up my guitar hardly at all in the past 15 years. I mean, I just didn't play. You know, just didn't play. Didn't have a reason to, and you know, and as time goes by, it just becomes less important. But then all of a sudden you get with these guys, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, and then you start talking about the stuff you've done together and the things that, man, we should get together. And then before you know it, you know, you're putting together a set list of songs you're going to learn. And so yeah, we'll see. You know, I kind of laugh as I look at it, because I mean, it's kind of amusing. I'm sure my kids must think I'm like the crazy old guy, but it's, you know, the things that you have passions for now, a lot of that you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. And I figure as long as I'm physically able to do it, which I still can, at least at some level, and a lot of my peers are still alive. We haven't all died yet. So hopefully there's a market for that kind of thing. We'll see. We'll see.
There's that always, whatever movie it is, we're getting the band back together. We're getting the band back together.
Well, you look at music today and you look at some of the, you know, it's amazing how bands like, you know, like the Eagles and Aerosmith, and I mean, which, you know, those were my heroes when I was in high school. It's weird because they've attracted a whole new generation of fans. And I remember my wife and I went to a Fleetwood Mac concert at the United Center a few years back, and there were these two little girls, like junior high age, right in front of us, who knew every word to every song. It's just, you know, and we go to concerts. We saw Foreigner and Styx not long ago, and a Journey and a bunch of others. And it's just, you know, the crowds are just unlike when I was a kid, it was only kids that would go to these concerts. But now you see everybody, grandmas and grandpas, down to these little kids, and they're all loving it.
So real quickly, before we get to those other two topics, you went to Olivet Nazarene. Is that where you went to college?
No, I taught there.
Okay.
And I managed, they owned the radio station that I managed. The Chicago area station. So they had, in addition to their campus program and station, they had this as a 35,000 watt FM station. That we had a staff for that. So it was interesting because it's kind of a precursor to the voiceover blueprint. It was, I love the model of having a professional operation where you mentor people who are learning, like a university hospital, where they're still doing procedures on real patients by real doctors, but they have students who follow them around and learn and work under their watchful eye. And I loved that model when I was at Olivet. And a lot of those kids, you know, went on to work in broadcast media and in the music industry as well. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it so much that I felt that would be a good model to use in voiceover as well.
Yeah, and that's something that we definitely want to hit on just as we kind of close out our time together, is your blueprint and just what you're doing with that and just all that is entailed, because it's such a great thing, and it's helping a lot of people. So we want to get to that. Let me just ask you, and again, you be the one that wades in as much as you want to or don't want to, but back maybe, I don't know, maybe it's been more than that now. You kind of stirred up some controversy, probably unbeknownst to you. You ran into, quote, a little trouble with the voiceover establishments. Can you explain, just for a little bit of a background, because some people might not be aware of that, and some of us who just follow you and that you just made business sense, we said, what's all the hubbub about? This doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's just business principles.
I didn't even know there was an establishment. I mean, who knew?
Yeah.
But with social media, I guess people can easily, create their own camps of how they operate, how they function, so they can throw rocks at each other. And,
Yeah.
what fun is life if you can't create your own camp to throw rocks at other people?
Uh-huh.
So I found out as time went by, as I began, promoting the training and getting on YouTube and explaining how I do what I do. Apparently, and I knew it was different from what the popular pervading wisdom was, but what I didn't expect was that it would have evoke a hostile reaction among people. And as I look back on it now, I can see why that happened. And as you said, Todd, I come from more of a business background. I mean, radio really helped build a foundation for me from a marketing standpoint. And you know what that's like when you're dealing with stations, and I don't know the stations you worked for, but I was operating with, very little marketing budget. So I had to learn to become very resourceful. And I learned a lot about marketing, and I felt like I was pretty good at it. And then worked for a business consulting firm after I left academia in Chicago. And so was able to work and help businesses in that way. So to me, those are the things that make sense. On a larger scale, you see how technology changes business. And I remember, I was teaching in an MBA program in marketing, and I remember giving case studies, talking about how it's changed the way, whether you're a manufacturing organization, it doesn't matter really what type of company it is, it changes the way you do business.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't fight technology. That's the big lesson here, is you either adapt or you die, because technology is not going to step back and say, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, I didn't, the people who created, the horse and buggy, it didn't back up from the people who just sold horses for transportation to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize the buggy was going to cut into your business so much. Or the automobile, industry. Oh, I'm sorry, we weren't trying to kill the horse and buggy business. Or the computers to the typewriters, or Uber and Lyft to the taxi. You could go on and on. Technology always wins. So you got to figure out how to operate within that. So to me, that, not only made good business sense, it just made sense. Why commit business suicide if you don't have to? So I started talking, and I tried to do here. This is important to understand. When I first got in voiceover, I hired a couple of coaches, good people, and they were good performance coaches, but I followed their advice. Their business advice was very simple: get your demo, get an agent, and audition. Then you audition, and if you don't get work, you get more training. You audition. If you don't get work, you get more training. And so I was doing this, and it was just hard. Well, you guys know, it's just hard to get work that way. Not that you can't get work that way, not that I haven't gotten work that way, but to build a sustainable business, it's next to impossible. There are a few people who do it. Most of them are in LA, where that's kind of the culture of the business,
right,
where most people work through their agents. But if you're in Wisconsin or Ohio or Illinois, even in the Chicago market, unless you're in the city, it just doesn't make good business sense. So, anyhow, I decided one day, a light came on and said, why don't you just do what you taught other people to do and what you used to do, when you're in business? And I thought, oh, okay. So I just went directly to I just started using marketing strategies to get in front of the right people. And son of a gun, if I didn't start getting work, it's amazing how quickly my business grew after I did that. Now, the pushback comes from the fact that when you circumvent the system, whether it's real or perceived, and a lot of this is just a perceived system. It doesn't have to be done that way, but it is done that way. You start to become a threat, again, whether real or perceived, to other people, because if I'm making my own rates, and let's say, Hudson, you've had a client for 30 years, and when you go out and do work, you never get paid less than such and such. Well, now all of a sudden there's 100,000 people coming into this business because technology allows them to, and they can communicate directly with clients. Well, now all of a sudden you've got to do some thinking. as a business person, how do I deal with this? Well, you don't want to do anything. You just want to keep getting paid what you've been paid, doing the work you've been doing. But they think that if I'm charging, say 75% of what you're charging, well, I'm stealing your work.
Mhm.
We could have a whole conversation around that. Well, am I really? Well, yeah, sure. I mean, there's an appeal there because you can get it for less, but just because I'm cheaper doesn't mean I'm the right fit for the
Mhm.
job. And we could have a big conversation around that. But the point is, the feeling is kind of a union mentality. And that is, you know, we need to be together and we need to enforce our own collective rate in the way we do business on these people. And if you don't, then you're against us, kind of thing. I know that's kind of a generalization, but that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I haven't, like, obviously I've only been in voiceover for a year, but my
Yeah.
dad and I have talked about that, and I've only known this side of, our side of voiceover. So I've never, getting an agent, stuff like that. I don't even know what that all entails, but I don't really want to get into it, but I can understand the difference in price and people being like, hey, you're, pushing me out of business here or something like that. So
Yeah, imagine you want to play baseball professionally, and the only way to play is it's only major league. That's the only league that's available, and you either play that or you don't play. You don't make money any other way. And then somebody comes along and says, "Oh, okay, well now we're going to have a league like a minor league. You're not going to get paid as much, but you still get to play. Plus, you get to develop yourself for an opportunity to make it." Major League Baseball could say, "Well, they're taking money out of our pockets because now people are going to go see the minor league teams and not spend their money on Major League Baseball." Well, it's a bad argument to begin with, because as we all know, there's lots of money, lots of fans, plenty to go around. Minor league baseball has not hurt Major League Baseball. They've actually used it to their advantage. I mean, it's a system that's been built around Major League Baseball. So I just think the thinking needs to change. And right now it's slow. I say slow. It's not changing at all as far as I can see, but someday, they either will or they won't be in business anymore.
Well, that's fine for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So you're saying that, are you still getting some heat sometimes from people, like when you do your YouTube stuff, or, hey, you're cheating the system, hey, you're making everything a lot lower, hey, you're whatever, you're not playing as part of the team, you're not playing fair, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I get snarky remarks. What's interesting, they're not as frequent as they used to be, because fortunately seems to be a sea of people who understand and appreciate what I'm trying to say. And the people who now, like in social media, I've noticed if they make a remark, they quickly get overwhelmed by these people who basically tell them to shut up. I mean, usually it's a nicer words than that. But the last thing I saw was it was on LinkedIn not long ago. There were a couple of people, I know who they are. They're pretty high profile in voiceover. And I don't remember exactly what the topic was, but their remark was really negative and trying to say that what I was doing is being harmful. And then all of a sudden they were just avalanche of positive comments about the post that I had made. Well, and I thought long and hard about a response, because I don't believe I don't want to add oxygen to a fight. I have no interest in that. But sometimes I think it's helpful for me to come back and explain and say, well, here's where I'm coming from. So I went back to explain my position, and they had already withdrawn their post. They had deleted their post from the. So I think people are they understand they you can't get by with that without having a lot of people, retaliate.
Yeah.
In a nice way.
That's a testament to you, Bill, for you have all those people coming to your, to your aid, and that's, that doesn't just happen with anybody. So,
well, I mean, it makes me feel good when they do that. Not that I need to be defended, but I'm glad that they can see and appreciate what's being said, because the reason I share it is because I want you to be able to use it. I mean, what point is it if nobody uses the information? And like you said, Todd, hey, and if nobody does, I mean, that's just more for us. But there's plenty out there. That's the thing. There's plenty out there. So it doesn't hurt us to share that information.